Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a special look at what our restoration teams are doing on a ship in the Gulf. My name is Sasha Francis. I'm the Gulf Restoration Education and Outreach Manager from National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, and I will be your host today. Soon we'll get to talk to our friends on a ship called the RV Point Sur, which is a 135-foot vessel owned by the University of Southern Mississippi and operated by the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, or LUMCON. Today, the team is currently located about 100 miles away from the coast of Louisiana. So throughout today's program, please share any questions or comments that come to mind in the chat, and we'll pause for questions as we go. Also, we would love to get your feedback on today's program. So we have a short survey you can fill out to tell us a little bit about your experience. We'll send the link to the chat now and then again at the end of the program. So we would love to have you fill that out before you log off today. All right, so in a few minutes, we'll join our friends on board for a chat. But first, we're going to talk about why they're there, what they're doing out there, and what this all is about. So we'll give you a little intro overview first. So as you travel deeper in the ocean, less sunlight is able to penetrate the water. Just past recreational scuba diving limits, you reach the mesophotic zone, which means middle light. Despite the low levels of sunlight, this zone is home to colorful corals, sponges, fish, invertebrates, and more. Beyond this twilight zone, there's no sunlight at all, as well as colder temperatures and higher pressure. But there are still vibrant habitats full of life at these depths, hundreds to thousands of feet below the surface. These mesophotic and deep benthic or seafloor ecosystems are found worldwide, including in the Gulf. And believe it or not, all this footage is actually from the Gulf. However, the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill dealt a heavy blow to communities on land and at sea. 11 people lost their lives, and natural resources, wildlife, and habitats across the Northern Gulf were severely impacted. Over 770 square miles of deep sea habitat were impacted by the spill. As a result, collaborative restoration projects are underway to help us understand and restore these seafloor ecosystems found below 160 feet deep. These projects are developing new and improved maps of the seafloor to locate these important coral communities, learning more about the species that live in these habitats, the environmental conditions they thrive in, and how they may be connected across the Gulf, which we'll talk more about today. They're also determining the best methods to encourage deep sea coral growth and reproduction to help restore impacted coral species and the important habitat they create, and reducing threats that these ecosystems face by removing marine debris and helping install mooring buoys and remove invasive species, and connecting the habitats and restoration work to the public and natural resource managers through programs like this. This restoration work, made possible by the Deepwater Horizon Natural Resource Damage Assessment Open Ocean Trustees, is led by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and the Department of the Interior, plus many partners, including a large number of academic institutions who we have joining us today, and non-governmental organizations. To learn more about the oil spill and all the restoration projects, check out the Gulf Spill Restoration website linked in the chat and video description. All right, so we're going to pivot now over to the ship to talk to folks actively working at sea right now. Hey, how's it going today?
Good. It's going great. We got some a little bit of swell out there, but we're doing pretty well. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So if you want to introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, where you're from, and what your part is on this mission or in the restoration work as a whole.
Sure. I'll go first. I'm Jane Carrick. I am a postdoctoral fellow from University of Rhode Island. I work on benthic landers, which are essentially platforms that we use to study the deep sea system over long-term periods. So up to a year, we deploy these systems that I'll talk about in a little bit, and I'll pass it back over to Jordan.
So I'm Jordan Hyman. I'm a postdoctoral research scientist with the University of Southern Mississippi, and I generally work on microbial ecology work, mostly on sediments at our deep sea habitats, mainly around the Deepwater Horizon wellhead.
Awesome. And this is like kind of your home boat, huh, Jordan?
Yeah, so University of Southern Mississippi does own the RV Point Sur, and so we're very fortunate to have such a great research ship at our disposal, and it gives us a lot of opportunities to collaborate with a lot of great scientists.
Yeah, we've been using it, I think, every year since we've started this field work. It's been a great partnership to have. So, with our theme today of message in a bottle, I want to talk about the many things we learn from collecting data in the water column and on the seafloor. So, our audience on land might be aware that the deeper in the ocean you go, the darker and colder the water gets and the pressure increases. What else is there for us to learn about environmental conditions and chemistry in the deep sea? What are these kinds of things that we're looking at?
Sure, I'll start with that one if that's right. So with the work that we do from University of Rhode Island, we basically place sensors down that record data for long periods of time. And something that's really great about that is that we get to understand the fluctuations over time. So something that's a little bit different about an ROV or a CTD cast or any of these kind of short-term visits to the seafloor, what you can see on the screen is one of our large benthic landers called the Albex lander. And that will sit on the seafloor for a year, recording very high resolution temporal data. So every 15 minutes for certain sensors, or the minimum is about every 2 hours for some of our instruments to be collecting data. And so we get these really interesting signals that are caused by things like stochastic events, or for instance, loop current eddies in the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf. And we get this kind of information that we wouldn't otherwise get with a quick visit. So it's almost like you're getting this record that explains a lot more about the Gulf than you would get just by visiting it once. I kind of like equate it to if you go to meet somebody for one visit versus getting to be very good friends with them. You get that longer amount of time to spend with understanding the environmental habitat.
That's very cool. Like, yeah, that's a really good metaphor, is like meeting somebody once or like hanging out with them for a whole year and how much more you would learn. So we're very glad to have those landers, and they're huge. They're like 7 feet tall.
That's right. Yeah, we have all different models of them, but that's kind of our bread and butter, the Albex lander, which stands for the Autonomous Lander for Biological Experiments.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about those other types of landers shortly. Jordan, did you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, so on top of all the really great environmental data that the landers can collect, we can also get a lot of really interesting biological data that can come from water. It can come from sediment. It can also come from biofilms and those kind of buildups that are present on rocks and things. So here you have a video of us push coring on a different expedition where we're collecting sediment samples, and all of that can help us really determine the health of an ecosystem, as well as what kind of organisms are living in the ecosystem, and helping cycle a lot of those nutrients and environmental data that the landers are able to collect long term.
Literally a message in a bottle.
Yeah.
Or
a sediment core.
Mud in a bottle.
Or in our case, it's data in a sensor bottle.
Yeah. Lots of types of bottles in this kind of research.
Yeah, it's really, really, really cool to be able to have all of these different components to the restoration projects. And I admittedly was like, what's mud all about? What's sediment sampling all about? And through working on these restoration projects, I've been able to get really excited about what you can discover in sediment, which is very cool.
Yeah, there's a lot more than meets the eye.
Exactly. And we have some great live stream recordings that are all about sediment too. So if anybody watching is really interested in like learning more about that, we have some specifically focused on those too. So excited to talk more about all the different things y'all are working on. All right. So since the habitats are so deep, we need special tools, which we've kind of touched on a little bit with some of the landers and sediment cores. Can you explain kind of the what a benthic lander is and what kind of information it collects and kind of how that compares to other types?
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole thing about the deep sea is that it really does not like humans to be there, right? So we have to design things that are really able to withstand things like the pressure and the constant exposure to salt water. And so we end up with a lot of pretty heavy duty equipment, usually in titanium housings that can withstand that pressure while keeping all of our sensors safe. And also we need to be able to recover it at the end. So we have a lot of kind of high-tech development of different things that are designed specifically to stay at depth for long periods of time. And so again, this is the Albex lander that I'm showing. What you're seeing me attach in this video here is an acoustic release system. And this is actually how we drop the lander. So the acoustic release is essentially a transducer at the top where that little blue cylinder is. And I'm attaching a mechanical latch that is tied to that transducer to the top of the lander. And once we send it down on a cable winch, I can then send an acoustic signal to it to tell it to drop the lander exactly where we want it. And so we were able to use a lot of acoustic signaling between the boat and our lander system to get really good precision placement. And then that will sit down there, and it's essentially, if you think of a moon lander, it's a similar design. It's essentially a frame, but we attach all different sensors that measure things like temperature, turbidity, fluorescence. We also have a sediment trap that can actually collect sediment from the surface. Anything that falls down will get trapped in that sediment trap, and we can then see what kind of flux from the surface makes its way down to the seafloor. And that is really important for us understanding what corals experience in terms of food supply and other different dynamics to do with the water column. We also have a benthic camera. So right now, this was actually 2 days ago, we deployed this large lander, and what you're seeing right now is the ROV's perspective waving at the camera. The lights are recording video in this image. We got really lucky with the timing when we went down to visit the lander and make sure that it looked good and was placed appropriately. Yeah, that was one of the most exciting things that I've gotten to do so far, is actually capture that 20-second. It's a 20-second window every 2 hours, so we got extremely lucky. It was about a minute after we got there. So we have all of these different sensors. Yeah. So we really got a complete profile, a complete understanding for as much as we can. That includes video, flux from the surface, and then all of these other environmental parameters, like I said, temperature, currents, etc. We really, we get to understand a lot about it with just one lander deployment.
That's so cool. And that was really like speaking of a moon landing situation, that video was like so extraterrestrial. I loved it.
Yeah, for sure.
So fun. Jordan, did you have anything else to add to that? I know we're talking specifically about landers at the moment. But.
Yeah, landers are really, really Jane's territory, and I've been very fortunate enough to help her out. It's been really fun for her to teach me more about landers than what I already knew.
Yeah, Jordan's been actually helping me a lot since we're a little bit short-staffed on this trip. I've been employing her, using her extra hands to help me with a lot of the equipment.
Teamwork, really important at sea. There's always so much to do and just like long days. So since we're all learning a little bit more about landers today, can you tell us like how you choose which lander to use for different things? Because we have that giant one, and then there's also like mini landers. So how do you choose which ones to use for what?
Yeah, so it really depends on what kind of information you want to get and also what habitat you're deploying in. So what you're looking at now is one of the University of Southern Mississippi's tri-landers. It is designed to go, I believe, to deeper depths, but it's also good for mesophotic depths. When we have something like a very deep sea deployment, greater than 1,000 meters, we would often go to the Albex lander, which is very, very stable. It can collect a lot of information, more so than pretty much any other lander design we have. And it's also extremely customizable, so we can put on different types of sensors depending on what we feel the project warrants at that time. So, for instance, a couple months ago, we put out a lander that had an echo sounder because we wanted to get information about the water column above the lander and flux of fishes and other small organisms moving up and down throughout the day. Or we could take that off and we can put in an acoustic Doppler current profiler, which gets more information about currents themselves and how they're moving and what dynamics are controlled by larger ocean currents. So really, we can kind of customize the Albex lander as much as we need to. This is us putting in the sediment trap sample bottles for that recent deployment as well.
That's so cool.
And then we also have some smaller landers that are much easier to deploy, for one thing. So that's our mini lander there. That is deployed by an ROV, actually. So we don't have that same acoustic release system. We just basically take it down in the ROV, and you can see these sensors attached. It has about 4 sensors that are, they're still a pretty complete profile. We have optical, fluorescence, and turbidity. We have a CTD mounted to it. We have a current profiler, and we also have a dissolved oxygen sensor on there. So we're still getting a lot of information with that small but mighty mini lander. And that can be deployed in a variety of depths. It doesn't have to be deep sea.
Very cool. And it's really amazing how customizable they are. You can really kind of pick and choose what things you add to it and what information you collect. I just want to note we have some of your friends from the lab in the chat saying hi. Philip and Sarah, say hi.
Hi, Philip. Hi, Sarah.
And Andy, who is the lab. The lab that you work for, Andy Davies, says hi and was answering a question.
Wonderful.
In the chat. So
Bill
I
is
just
one of our PhD students with us, and Sarah is another postdoc in the lab. So hi, guys.
Yes, they are participating in this restoration work too, and also Sophia in the chat had a question which Andy chimed in and answered, but she said, "Do the landers transmit data in real time, or do you have to recover it to see what it collects?" And Andy, who's in between meetings right now, said, "Fully autonomous. We don't see the data till we recover the lander in a year's time," which I think you touched on, Jane. But there are ways we can get glimpses of the data, but they're too far from shore. So that's a
And I should
fun
probably
little.
mention, sorry, Sasha.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
should probably mention who Andrew Davies is. So Andy Davies is the head of the lab, the principal investigator, and so he is one of the preeminent experts on landers in the world for these types of systems. And so he's taught me everything I know, as well as the other members of the lab. And we've really kind of accelerated this lander program due to his ambition, and it's been a really great project for all of us to learn so much, not just about science, but about mechanics and how to use power tools, amongst other things.
And in fact, he's not with us today because he's running around with meetings and trainings in the lab. So shout out to Andy, still running around on shore while y'all are doing this great work at sea. And then we also have a great article that I worked with Andy on last year that we can put in the chat that talks about the lab work and kind of the design, with a great video of y'all creating and building that lander design. So we can add that into the chat too. Awesome. All right. So we talked a lot about landers, but what are some other tools that help us understand like physical and biological conditions in the deep sea? And what all do we use on these different restoration missions that also help?
Yeah, so probably after the landers, the next sort of biggest it's deployed on nearly every research scientific mission, restoration mission, on any research vessel, pretty much anywhere, which is a CTD. And so CTD stands for conductivity, temperature, and depth. So that's 3 different sensors that get put on those that measure conductivity, temperature, and depth. Conductivity we can use to calculate the salinity of an environment, which can be really important for what kind of organisms will be tolerant of that saline condition. And so here's a video of our CTD here on the Pointser getting deployed. And then you see those gray bottles on top. That's called our rosette. Those are called Niskin bottles, and those can collect water at any depth. So those can be remotely triggered from the ship to close at any depth that we want to collect water at. And so we're not actively deploying our CTD on this mission, but we are deploying a slightly different model of a CTD to still collect that really important environmental data at each of the sites that we're visiting on this expedition. And then you empty the water out of those Niskin bottles, and you can do all kinds of things with that water. You can get water chemistry, you can get biological data using like eDNA kind of techniques and see what kind of microbes might be there, or eDNA you can also use to track different populations, so you can see what kind of fish have been in the area recently, because fish shed their scales as they swim by, and that leaves a DNA fingerprint behind that we can track. And so our clump weights also carry a lot of sensors and data on them. So that last clip was us deploying the clump weight that is attached to our ROVs. And those have sensors and things on them as well to collect all kinds of environmental data. So really, every time we're deploying anything off of the ship, we're having some sort of sensor in the water to collect some sort of data so we can learn as much as possible about these environments.
That's so cool. I did not know there were data instruments on the clump weight. I just learned that too. Really making the most of like every minute at sea and every time we deploy something. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really deep sea science it's not cheap. And we only have so much time out on the ship. So we really try to maximize the amount of data and information that we can get while we're out here.
Amazing. And on that note too, I know we added it to the chat in the beginning, but to learn more about the restoration work, all of this is possible because of the oil spill settlement that happened. Yes. So just to make a note for everybody, and that link is in the chat too, if folks want to learn more about all the different restoration projects resulting from the oil spill too. Jane, did you have anything else to add as far as tech and data collection goes?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could talk about for hours and hours about this stuff for sure. I guess one of the coolest things is when we pull up the data and we get to see really some dynamic. It's kind of like reverse engineering a story about what is going on with, for instance, something like a water mass moving over our site, and then trying to understand, kind of backtrack what that means for the coral. So if we see, for instance, like a high signal in optical fluorescence, that can tell us that there's a pulse of chlorophyll maybe coming down from the surface, which could mean that there was some sort of spring bloom happening, where we have a flux downwards of this organic material that then gives the corals a lot of food. And so kind of, I know you're about to transition into restoration work, so I'm going to kind of talk a little bit more about that, if that's all right. So the reason that we kind of want to use landers for this project especially is to really understand these habitats in order to restore them. And so part of my PhD work was to understand the coral niche and how that relates to their success in different habitats. So using landers, we're actually recording data for the purpose of understanding that niche. We can get the limits of environmental information that we know that they can exist within. So I primarily study stony corals, but it's also great to understand octocorals like you're seeing on the screen here. And if we have a good range and a good understanding of the thresholds of tolerance that corals have, we can then better design the outplanting and restoration methods that we want to use, and also the sites that we think they will be most successful. So really, we're kind of feeding all of this data into best practices for restoration down the line.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that great overview of kind of the getting back to all the reasons why we are using all of this equipment and why we're doing all this work is so that we can best restore these areas most efficiently and effectively by knowing exactly what is all down there and exactly what the corals that we're restoring need to thrive and also be resilient in the future. So I know you mentioned, about kind of particulate coming down through the water column and learning about coral food. So can you tell us a little bit about like how deep sea corals are different from shallow corals as far as like how they eat?
Absolutely. So unlike shallow corals, deep sea corals are entirely dependent on feeding what's called heterotrophically. So they need to eat just like we do. Whereas in the shallows, they all have internal symbionts. They have a symbiosis with an algae that allows them to capture energy from sunlight, and they can kind of self-feed that way. In the deep sea, there's obviously no sunlight. So in order for them to get the energy that they need to grow and to reproduce, they need to basically extend the polyps, as you can see here with this nice Swiftia coral, and try to capture either small particulates or small bits of zooplankton that are somehow transported down from the surface. And that's where the benthic lander really comes in. We can really see those signals of food material coming down to the habitat, and then we can understand better how those energy budgets that are pretty high for corals, especially in the deep sea, are met. And so that is primarily done with the sensors. I mentioned an optical fluorometer where we get to understand the amount of fresh organic material from fluorescence and chlorophyll. We also have that sediment trap that we actually capture physical samples that we can then take back to the lab and analyze and see on a time scale which months are getting more food supply than others, and what kind of material is the bulk of what's making its way down to the reef.
That's amazing. Because yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it doesn't have to necessarily be live material, but it can be things like algae or even kind of some deceased material. The corals are very capable of kind of customizing what they eat. They are generalists. They can eat a lot of different things in order to meet those energy budgets, I'll say.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what we're learning both at sea, with all of this data collection work of knowing what exists in these spaces where we're seeing healthy corals, but also in our lab, which is what some of that other video footage we've been showing is from. So we have 3 federal labs across the U.S. and then also partner labs at different aquariums and universities where we're actually keeping healthy coral fragments and learning more about their food preferences, how they reproduce, how long it takes them to grow, what kind of different textures they do like to grow on, so that we can take all of that information we're learning along with all this great information we're learning in the field from these data collection things like landers and ROV footage to see the habitats and mapping of the seafloor to find the coral communities, taking all of these different components of all the different for restoration projects together and really understanding as much as possible so that we can restore these coral habitats, outplant some corals back out into the wild, and really help them thrive. So it's amazing how much we're learning from all of these different efforts throughout the projects. Very cool. All right. So I think that's all the questions I had for y'all. I'm going to check in the chat here to make sure we don't have any new questions, I think. Just some comments that it's interesting to hear about all these long-term projects. So people are very interested in hearing about the work. So thank y'all for sharing time with us today. So we'll just wrap up by asking y'all, what's the favorite thing that you've experienced either on this mission, or if there's something grand from another restoration mission you've been on with MDBC and the Mesophotic and Deep Benthic communities projects. What's been a highlight for you participating in this work?
Well, yesterday we were able to actually collect a basket star that was associated with a coral sample that we were able to grab with the ROV. And so that was really cool to actually bring up not only some really healthy coral, which is incredible to see healthy corals, but also some really healthy and large associates that grow and live on those corals and help keep our reefs healthy. And so seeing that basket star and a lot of the associated brittle stars with those corals is really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Seeing cool creatures is always super fun. Yeah, I have to say, for me, for this trip specifically, was catching that video timing when we went down with the ROV to check on our lander that we had deployed the other morning, and we happened to be within 3 minutes of the camera coming on. You can see my unbridled joy there. The fact that those lights came right on, right as soon as the ROV got into position, it was just so fun. And we'll be able to see that on video in a year's time. So that's been really cool. And I would say, I'm just going to add overall for the entire MDBC project, it's the amount of amazing scientists and friends that I've made over the time that I've been working on this project. It's just amazing to have such a network of really smart and really hardworking people that I get to call friends.
Yeah,
so that's corny, but I love them.
It's definitely a really great part of this project for sure.
Agreed. It's really incredible how many experts we have that just are so knowledgeable about such specific components of this work, down to oh, this is the expert on this type of sponge. To have those people participating in this restoration work is super special, especially for all of us that might have other, specific expertise. To learn from each other and appreciate each other's experience is really special. Not only are we working with all the universities like y'all are highlighting today, but we also work really closely with the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History and their experts there. And just in USGS sediment experts, like we talked about too. I mean, it's just a wealth of knowledge, and really amazing to see all those people come together to help restore these habitats. It really gives me hope when I see everybody's excitement in their part of the work, and also learning about everybody else's parts of this work is really special. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate y'all taking the time. I wish you fair seas. I know it's been a little bit rough, but so far, so good. So thanks for taking time with us today, and we appreciate you, and hope to see y'all soon. We'll let you get back to work. Awesome.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. So we have some more live streams coming up next week. Some spooky Halloween theme ones, I think. So check out the University of Rhode Island's Inner Space Center YouTube page and save those dates. We're going to drop that link in the chat. But if you found us today, then you can certainly find whatever live streams are coming up, as well as our playlist on there of past live streams. And to learn more about these projects, find articles, publications, story map, hear about updates, check out that link provided in the chat there where it says learn more about deep sea restoration. And then again, we'd love to get your feedback on the program. So please fill out a quick survey that will be linked in the chat as well. And thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.